I know, this is gonna be like a call and repeat, like back and forth. I'm gonna go right back to teaching in classrooms. So if I do that, I'm sorry, but I like it so much better that way. I wanna welcome everyone here. It is wonderful to have you all here tonight. My name is Curry Sotner. I'm the president and CEO here at Eastern State. And it is just an amazing thing for us to be able to partner with organizations that are doing such powerful work around this country and through this city to do good. And here at Eastern State, we preserve America's first penitentiary to advance the understanding, the public understanding of the criminal justice system. But we do that with the intent and purpose to make change for the justice system and to do good. We talk about that all the time. We talk about how do we grapple with this site that mixes so many emotions in people's minds, a site of intense trauma, intense pain, but at the same time, you turn around and look at the beauty and at the resilience that we can find here in the historic record, the resilience of people who are incarcerated here and how they strived and fought to hold on to their human dignity, and how the original intent of this site back in 1787 when the idea came up to do it was about respecting human dignity, was about not putting scarlet letters on people for their life, was to really say that every single one of us has an inner light and we should figure out a way together to make that shine. Now we know all the best plans of mice and men, mostly men, but just kidding, sorry, that can go completely wrong. And it is in the humility of the work that we do to ensure that we are not taking that same path, that we say, if we believe in human dignity, if we believe in the human spirit, then we won't create one of the most traumatic ways to hold people in this place invented mass scale solitary confinement. So that is a part of the work we do to ensure that we're taking a site of trauma and using it to do good, to partnering with great people to utilize this space and the work that we do to make change. So we are so grateful that you chose to use this conversation here tonight. We thank you for that. We are honored to have you all in here because Eastern State is far more than a ruin. It's a place where history and the passions of people today can come together to make change. We believe in opportunities, and we believe in fresh starts and making sure that that scarlet letter is not on people for life. And every single person has an opportunity for the simple process of our country to ensure that we have life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, that pursuit of happiness, and the community that it comes with. So thank you all for being here. I'm so excited to be sitting in that audience in a minute and be listening to all of you. And thank you all for being on this stage with us and telling us your stories. Have a great night. We'll see you out there.
Thank you. So I'd like to say that there's an Eagles game tonight, or that the Phillies are in the finals of the playoffs, or anything like that. But the truth is that I've come to understand that the greatest things can happen in the smallest of audiences. And we're going to have a really lively discussion tonight. You're all going to be involved. So even you back there, we're all going to be part of this discussion. Before we begin, just want to thank Eastern State Penitentiary for opening up their home to us and this wonderful place and facility. My name is Jeffrey Abramowitz. I'm the CEO of the Petey Greene Program. And there's a wealth of people that I'd like to thank before I even begin talking. And two of our sponsors for tonight, two people representing our sponsors, are here from Ocean First Bank. And I want to thank them for being a partner of the Petey Greene Program. And we're looking forward to working with you guys in the coming year. This is a special week of events for the Petey Greene Program and the Puckhammer Center for Educational Justice and Equity. It's our celebration of Going Green, which is a time where we select a topic of criminal justice related, and we honor and respect it, and we try to educate people on the challenges that individuals face across our country when it comes to mass incarceration. The Petey Greene Program lies in this really special, unique place because it's in these walls of the prisons and jails around the country where we make change happen. We make change happen through education, through helping people get smarter so that while they're incarcerated, They can figure out how to get their high school diploma or go post-secondary into college, or they can get a career credential so when they get out they can get a career opportunity. And we're humbled at all the volunteers that work for the Petey Greene Program, and mostly college students and volunteers from universities across the country that dedicate their time coming in. I'm CEO of the Petey Greene Program for 2.5 years now, and I took this job for two principal reasons. Number one is I'm passionate about education in the carceral setting, and number two is because I'm passionate about making change happen. And when you bring young people into a prison environment and show them the humanity that are behind the walls of our prisons and jails, and how brilliant some of the men and women are that are behind the walls, that there's no doubt that you're shaping their minds of the way they envision our carceral system. We'll be talking a lot about the carceral system and our challenges that we face in the country. I'm so grateful that we have a lot of my friends in the room, but I wanted to kick us off tonight by giving you a little something personal, which is last Tuesday I celebrated my 10th year of being home from incarceration. And I returned home September 10th of 2015 and lived in a shelter abroad at Lehigh in Germantown. And during that time began teaching GED math at Community Learning Center, which is now Beyond Literacy. And there is where I began to really understand that incarceration is not just behind the walls. Incarceration also happens when you come home, because living in a shelter, you're often stuck with the rules of when you can come and when you can go. And I used to tell people that I felt more incarcerated when I came home than when I was actually incarcerated. But this place is a special place for me because I remember that I would walk from Broad and Lehigh, and I'd come down here whenever I kind of wanted to get grounded and remember the past journey that I had been on. And I'd come here and I'd sit in different places around this building, and it would remind me of not so much what I had done that gotten me into prison, but all the lessons that I learned from it. And that's really what it's all about, the lessons that we learn. So the Petey Greene Program is in this place where, as CEO, I hope to bring some of that passion and some of that understanding, that empathy to the work that we do, and to really shine the light on how important it is to help people both behind and beyond the walls of our prisons and jails in our country. Over the next week, we'll be celebrating Going Green, which is recognizing food injustice in our prisons and jails. Last night we kicked off the event with our web series, our Justice Education series, where we talked about justice, education, nutrition behind the walls. In the coming weeks, next Thursday, in particular, we're going to be having an event, and I see Desmond entered, with the Philadelphia Office of Reentry Partnerships, or Reentry Division now, or I want to make sure I get it right. And we're going to be having an afternoon, not really a job fair, but a meet and greet with some employers in Philadelphia and those that want to be in the culinary industry. And then we'll be having an event honoring Brandon Cheskowski, who is the president and CEO of EDWINS restaurant in Cleveland, which is a 5-star restaurant that's owned and operated by individuals who are justice impacted. And he recently won the James Beard Award. So having him into Philadelphia at this time is unbelievably beneficial and timely. So tonight we're really here talking about fair chances and fair chance hiring. And I guess I should start this off by telling you the last 2 days I've been in Washington, D.C., actually since Monday, and we're celebrating Adult Education and Family Literacy Week in Washington. And as we see adult education funding being pushed aside nationally by our federal government, we're working hard to impress upon legislators on how important education is both behind the walls and as people come home, getting people smarter. But the universal message that I heard, and Marcus was with me, Marcus was in Washington as well, the universal message we heard across legislators were that while education is super important, that we have to be thinking about getting people into careers and getting them into jobs. Right now in the United States, we have more we have more jobs than we have people to fill them. In the city of Philadelphia in particular, we see thousands of men and women return from prisons and jails back into the Philadelphia community, and oftentimes at a rate of 70% of them will remain unemployment 1 year after they're released. Finding a career opportunity or job in our current environment is unbelievably challenging. It's challenging for a number of things, and we're going to talk about many of them, many of those challenges, including background checks, and being truly employer friendly, and getting over all of those 40,000 plus barriers to employment that exist out there, including getting identification and transportation and diapers for your children and housing, and the list goes on and on and on. But the reality for many folks is that getting that career opportunity, that one bite at the apple, that one opportunity could change their life forever. And it was but for the fact that I walked into the office at Broad and Lehigh and was insistent that my resume get shown to the director, who I didn't know was actually the director that I gave it to at the front desk, when they were looking to, they were going to be closing their doors. They had lost some of their funding at Beyond Literacy at the time, or Community Learning Center, and but for the fact that they gave me an opportunity, and that was what got me going. And there are many men and women that face those same challenges that don't have that opportunity. So fair chance hiring, we're going to get down into the weeds, but I hope we're all going to be really frank and truthful about it and honest and have a candid discussion. But most importantly, I want to walk out of here tonight with some suggestions and solutions. Look, we have folks here from the Philadelphia prison system, yay. From our city offices, yay. We have Shu Jamores in the house, wonderful filmmaker. We have people that walk in this field all the time that are doing this, that need to hear what some of the challenges are, but more importantly, some of our ideas of what we can do to change the system. How can we make an impact? How can we, what will move the needle in a different way? I know the community grocers sitting up here, and they're doing some great work. We're going to be talking to them tonight, too. So I want to get to our panel, and I want to keep this really kind of chill. So if you have questions, just raise your hand. We're going to gut right to you, and we're not going to wait for Q&A at the end. But I want to start with why we do this. And the why we do this is the very first person that's sitting on our panel today. Roberto Gonzalez is newly hired by the Petey Greene Program. And why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your story?
All right. Like you just said, my name is Roberto Gonzalez, and I'm just as impacted. I spent 35 years in prison. I went to prison when I was 17 years old. Was probably never getting out again until that ruling in 2012 gave us the possibility. And I was fortunate enough to benefit from that and came home last October. And I think one of the biggest things, the impacts that I had was I got transferred to SCI Chester after spending 30 years in one prison. And I went to SCI Chester, and Eastern University brought their prison education program in there. And I was able to get my associate's degree through that program. And I was out of education probably for 30 years before that. So I went from, being in high school to prison. Pell Grants were pulled like right as soon as I got into prison. And so there was no chance for, post-secondary education in there. And then Pell Grants were reinstated. Different programs were taking their degree programs inside the walls. And Eastern University brought theirs in there, and I got my degree through them. But even more than that degree, it was like, we spoke about it already. Well, Jeff spoke about it, the dignity and humanity that we were shown through that program has gone a long way. And through that program, I was able to come into contact with the Petey Greene Program. And we had tutors in there that helped everyone with assignments. They would come in, some semesters would be twice a week. And so I stayed in contact with them upon my release. I've done various projects with them. And then I was fortunate enough to get a job with them now through a grant that was, funding this position. I'm working mostly with reentry. So I'm looking forward to partnering up and just speaking with all these different coalitions that are doing the same things and seeing where we can all help each other and make some headway in this struggle.
Well, we're going to come back to you when we talk about how you got ready to come home, because you gave us a little bit on the education front, but hang in there for a second, and congratulations.
Thank you.
And welcome to Petey Greene family.
Thank you.
Marcus, I'm going to go to you next, because Marcus, you can introduce yourself, but you and I came in contact at Community Learning Center, and I was wondering if you could talk a little about how you got involved in workforce development and what you do now.
So good afternoon or good evening, everyone. Thank you, Jeff, for inviting me here. So Marcus Hall, my name. I'm Director for Workforce Operations for Philadelphia, for the Workforce Board for Philadelphia County, Philadelphia Works. I came here, and within the workforce development space, I used to actually be, I'm a product of multiple systems. I lost my parents very early, and I was in the foster care system for a number of years as a child, and was able to get out of it, be able to proceed and go into post-secondary, work for, actually was a student from Morehouse College, and ultimately, we fall victim to circumstances. I was also a product of the criminal justice system and was released in 2012, at which point, regardless of what type of credentials or whatever experience I had or whatever tutelage I was able to receive, was really not able to get any type of job or employment. Essentially, my existence became irrelevant in many cases. And I remember being a host at Longhorn Steakhouse, because that was the only job I was able to find that did not have a background check. It took me about like 8 months, and then I was a cook for Sundays, and it was terrifying. And I'm like, I know how to cook a steak now in terms of like being able to tell the difference between rare and medium rare, so I'm good there. But I remember I had a conversation with one of the workforce advisors of Petey Greene. I really went in. I was reaching like my last rope. Was able to meet a workforce advisor, and essentially the workforce advisor connected me to Jeff as part of, I think, Jeff, you were teaching a class at that time. And honestly, I said that, like, I've had this experience. I know that I want to be able to give back. I was giving back in many cases when I was in college, when I was in school. And I need a second chance. I need a fair chance. In which the workforce advisor connected me with Jeff, who then connected me to Community Learning Center. I then applied and was able to be an instructor for adult education, teaching GED classes. I will tell you that one of my experiences, in which I'll be hopefully be able to go through a little bit more, and which we all have to deal with when we're in these circumstances, is that there's implicit bias that's really in the system, and that we naturally just have to be able to work with. As one of my professional experiences, there was a staff member who was essentially not in favor of the new executive director who was being hired at the time. She was on her way out, and then before she left, she essentially told the board that, like, well, you may want to check in with your ED because your ED likes to hire ex-offenders. And the board then challenged it, and essentially it was really up to the current chief program officer and the ED at the time to really be able to vouch for me, to be able to keep me in that particular position. And if it was not for them to be able to advocate for me on behalf of the board, I may not be here right now, right? So having advocates, being able to speak about your experience and being able to, like, trust people to be able to have your back in many cases when there are going to be folks that we have dealt with who are not going to have those types of intentions. And if it was not for that moment, like I said, I would not be here. In my position right now, I actually oversee all of those career links. All right, so I came in ultimately trying to be able to get some resources from the career links. I sit now here as the person who oversees how everyone else is supposed to get resources from those career links. So from a workforce development standpoint, I personally can't stand systems. My mission is to be able to understand that systems are designed to be able to assist people in a very box-formatted, systematic type of process and orientation. But so many of us, especially within this city, do not sit within a box. We sit within barriers and circumstances and considerations that we all have to take into account to be able to adequately provide people with the services that they need to be able to move forward with their journey, move forward with their goals. Thankfully, I'm in a position now to be able to help support those who are in those positions. But from a workforce development standpoint, it was really just a means of I needed to be able to have someone who looked at me in a way that allowed for me to be able to have another opportunity that I just could not afford for myself. And someone did. It took one, and then ultimately we're off and running at that point. So happy to discuss more, but thank you, Jeff.
There you go. Yeah, it's a great story, and we're going to get back to Marcus because we want to talk about what's going on in Philadelphia when it comes to fair chance hiring a bit. But before we do, Kevin, you have a remarkable story, and I was wondering, as an employer in Philadelphia, successful employer in Philadelphia, if you could share a little bit about your story and the work you guys do.
Yes, thank you, and thank you, Jeff, for asking me to be here today. My name is Kevin Hart, and I own the Hart of Catering and Cafe at 21st and Sansom, and we also have a nonprofit wing called the Heart of Recovery. Both me and my partner are in long-term recovery, but it took a long, long time to get there. I started doing hard drugs and drinking around 17 is when I got really addicted. And for the next 17 years, I was in and out of county jails, rehabs, halfway houses, recovery homes, just trying to, find a way to get out of that, miserable existence. There was a lot of times where, I lost hope, along that journey. But there was always someone there, who gave me a chance, gave me a good job, or something to, show me that there is still hope. I'm in the restaurant business, obviously, and I've been in the restaurant business my whole life. There's not a lot of background checks in the restaurant business, so a lot of times that was not an issue, having a record or being a felon. Although I do remember one occasion I got hired at a fine dining restaurant, and I was excited for this new opportunity, and I was newly sober, and I was had just started, and I was there, maybe 20 minutes, and the manager came to me and he said, "Did you put anything in the locker?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Come with me." And we went out back, and he said, "We ran your record. We don't like what we see. Goodbye." And I remember the guilt and the shame that I felt, from that at that moment, embarrassment, that was, where my life had taken me, I remember one time I was on State Road and, going through the orientation and the quarantine process, and they used to, I don't know if they still do, they used to give you 10 free minutes on the phone every day or 3 free phone calls, and I remembered how great those phone calls were, and someone was, selling their time, their minutes for some food, and I thought, my gosh, why would you do that? It was like the best part of the day, the only good part of the day. And, I befriended him and talked to him later and found he had no one to call. No one was answering the phone anymore, And then I found myself, like 12 years later, in that same spot where I was like in and out of jail, and no one wanted to talk to me anymore, And I couldn't believe where my life had led me, Homeless in 3 different cities. It was, it was a struggle. And then to the life that I have today is just amazing. It's like the complete opposite. We have 2 recovery homes on our block in Grace Ferry. We're able to run as, not for profit, for people, where you have your own bedroom and you can close your door, and have that peace at the end of the day, instead of being crammed, 6 people, 3 bunk beds in a tiny bedroom where this is all about money, But so today, when you said successful employer, that's wild to me. We started this company 3 years ago, and yeah, it really has. I mean, it's been a lot of hard work, but we are becoming successful, and we're able to employ, many people now, which is awesome, and to be able to see people come in early recovery, just getting out of jail or prison, and to let them know that there is hope, because I was where you are coming from, so it's a great feeling.
Thanks, Kevin, and congratulations. I know Hart Cafe is doing an amazing job. You'll get to taste some of their food later on. there are so many barriers to people coming home and getting employment. And I'm curious, Roberto, if you can just help us, what are the biggest challenges that either you face or you see some of the participants that are coming home face when it comes to just reintegrating? Just the second you walk out the door, what is it that hits you hard?
Do you mean as far as like employment or just in general?
I think in general, because I think there's an overlap, and we're going to get to some of that.
I would say overall, unbeknownst to most people, like prison doesn't prepare you to come home. You know, technology is like so far advanced, and inside they don't teach you technology. So I came home actually, and I went to McDonald's, and I looked at the screen, and I'm like, I don't even know how to order. You know, like, and I just said, you know, I just walked out and I left. So it was one of those things. And then I had another friend, he got out and he was like, he wanted to join the gym. So he went to the gym, he had $15 to pay for the month, and they didn't take cash. So he had to go to Walmart and he had to buy a debit card, and he had an adventure just trying to get the debit card activated, you know? So it's like, that doesn't prepare you. It also doesn't prepare you as far as like job opportunities. Like we're talking about fair chance hiring. I think the biggest thing is the background check. I was asked earlier, what's the solution to that? Say that you're a fair chance hirer? No, just say you don't do background checks. Because if you go into it, I feel, and my experience has been that when people already have that stigmatism of who somebody is that's been in prison, like they see TV, they see this, that's not reality. Sometimes it is. Very rarely it is the reality. But most of the times it's not. That's not who that person is. But that stigma is attached to them. And so now when you say, yeah, I have a felony, like I was just telling Dr. Johnson earlier, I went home last Friday. I got a second job in the restaurant industry, so I love it. And I got a little frustrated at the restaurant that I'm at. So I went home Friday, I started filling out applications, and one place came up and it says, have you ever had a felony conviction? I hit yes. And a whole string of questions just popped up and everything. So then I went back and I hit no, and it just went to the next question. You know, so I'm like, I'm not even going to tell them, but they have this thing now, it's called Google, so they can Google you, and everything just comes up about you. And, you know, so that's the biggest thing. So in the restaurant that I'm working at now, it's in another city from where I live at, because I didn't want to run into people that know me and be like, hey, this guy was in prison for all these years and he's working here. So I'm working in another city and they know nothing about my background, and everyone treats me like a normal person. But now add that little tidbit of information that I had a felony, that I spent 35 years in prison, and I wonder how they would treat me.
So it's a great point. So background checks are a huge problem, a large part. Because, you know, oftentimes it's a way employers weed out those candidates that they just want to draw the pool down. It's not based on talent. It's not based on anything other than whether they had a background or not. And what's interesting about it, this morning I spoke at CareerLink down in Chester, and there were 12 people that were all on parole. They had come out within the last month. They were all in this room, and they all said the same thing. We've applied for job after job after job, and we get bumped out because of our background check. What do we do, Mr. A? How do we handle it? And it's a really tricky situation because, you know, I gave them one piece of advice right up front and something that is a solution. And one thing is, get a copy of your darn background. And I say this really intentionally because there's a great book out, just came out recently, that has all the data behind the accuracy of background checks. And 76% of all background checks are inaccurate. 76%. So you should see what's on your background. And you want to know what the person on the other side of the table is actually looking at when you get hired, when you go for that interview. So at least you can say, you know what, I know you may get my background check and there may be 34 things in there, but 33 of them were dismissed, right? And I didn't plead to them. And I took responsibility for what I needed to. Background checks are probably one of the biggest barriers, and if we're going to do anything legislatively to try and move the needle in fair chance hiring, we really should be thinking about how do we fix the criminal background check system where it becomes more relevant and background checks are required only in certain circumstances. And there's no question that there are times that people that have committed certain offenses shouldn't be doing certain jobs. And they're not allowed to because insurance doesn't allow it, or maybe they pose a danger to society, whatever that might be. I get that there are some jobs may not be appropriate. However, background checks are used as a means. The EEOC recently came down with some more guidance to kind of guide employers a little bit. Marcus, what's the solution? Like, what should we be thinking about? You're forcing people like Roberto to go to essentially be dishonest in the job application because they're afraid of not being truthful. Is Ban the Box the answer? And if you want to explain what Ban the Box is, then people might understand.
So Ban the Box was an initiative that essentially prevented an employer from asking at the front end of the application whether or not you have anything on your criminal record. Essentially, they have to be able to make you an offer before they're able to ask about whether or not you have something on your record. The research that's come out recently has essentially said that it's really almost counterproductive in how it's being implemented, as many employers, implicit bias, many HR professionals are essentially now, since they can't ask the question, they're looking at the persona of the person that's in front of them and making a judgment based off of just their idea of the person and looking at their background. So they're looking at gaps in work history. They're looking at like some dramatic reductions in terms of actual positions. Like if you went from like associate manager to like an entry-level position, they're making assumptions there in terms of what happened during that period. So Ban the Box was intended to be able to create a little bit more equity within the system to allow for folks to be able to compete for positions, but I think more research that's recently come out is disproving that fact. To the question about what is like the solution, I don't know if if there was a true solution, and I think that we would be having a much different conversation. But I think that ultimately the strategies that we are working to be able to help people understand is that, like, if you're approaching an employer, because ultimately you have a passion and interest and a skill set for that particular position. And Ban the Box, while it is not perfect, it does offer more time to be able to prove to an employer and to an HR professional of your value, of your experience, of the actual correlating experiences, essentially, that's tied to the position. And honestly, what we have started to really push people to do is that if you know the background check process is coming, many employers have actually given us feedback saying that like they're actually know that is coming. They want for someone to be able to vouch and use the appeals process to be able to actually advocate for themselves for that particular position, because they, as part of their HR professionals, have to go through with the background check process. So HR oftentimes has to then go to the industry or to the executive for that actual decision. So the executive then has to say like, all right, hey, I know you're interested in this potential candidate. This came back. What do you want to do, right? And so many of different, like the feedback that we've received is that many of those executives have now said like, all right, so what options do they have to be able to advocate for themselves if I have to be able to circumvent this process? Because they've gotten to know you, they've gotten to be able to see your experience, but they have to get through their own internal processes before they're able to get you into the door. So many people see that background check process, they see the notice come through saying that like something came through, and they think that the process is dead at that point. Many of the employers are actually saying like, we want for you to actually apply for the appeals process.
Marcus, wouldn't it be smart though for an employer to just say, look, we're not going to hire if you have this offense, this offense, this offense, and this offense, and just lay it on the table and be honest with people so that when they apply for the job, they know whether they have a fighting chance or not?
I don't think it's that clear cut, because I don't think that there's who's making that decision. Which HR professional is making that decision? Which executive is making that decision? Because you can have one person who's a CFO who has a lot more interest in white collar crimes, a lot more of the actual wants to really be able to put an onus on those and have that as a higher level of decision making within the process, rather than the COO who has a completely different perspective. It is not uniform across industries in many cases, And often it needs to be a little bit more progressive into thinking how these actual offenses are really impacting the execution of the position.
I get it. I guess one of the challenges I have is what we're seeing nationally is this movement towards skill-based hiring. And, Kevin, before I want to give Dr. Johnson a shot. Before I get to my point, go for it.
Do you recommend that an applicant share their history before the background check
I would not.
process?
I would not. Is that part of? So the reason I say that is because why are you bringing in that information? Ultimately, the question that, like, this is a conversation about my experience and the position and the job that it entails. And so if I'm now offering that information, I'm now giving you information that, one, was not asked. Okay, so you have no leverage in terms of like how it's going to be received. And ultimately, you're now hoping that it's going to be received in a way that is positive in like your consideration. It is not part of the job. It's not part of the actual experience. It's not part of my consideration for why I'm even here, right? And so if you give them that, you're losing a bit of leverage in terms of being able to actually have a fair chance at competing for these positions. So I would not say that. I would not we do not encourage folks to be able to do it. Not in the sense that we're hiding anything, but you don't want to approach it in terms of like you have a disadvantage within this particular the competition of this position, right? You are competing based on your experiences, and you're thinking your experiences is tied to this particular position.
So, and I disagree. And I think and there's two schools of thought. I think Marcus has put one that is pretty common in the industry, is a lot of people say, just don't disclose if you don't have to. I disagree. I live in a world where I think transparency is the bottom line, that if you want to work for a company and you need to be honest with them from the second you go through that interview up until, because it may impact you, may not today, may not impact your hiring, may be down the road. For example, you get hired with a company and you don't disclose something on your criminal background. And then 3 months, 6 months, a year goes by and they call you down. Roberto, congratulations, we're moving you up. We're going to advance you to supervisor of our company. And you're going to be now charged of $50,000 maybe of payroll and all these things. There's responsibilities. Go down to HR and get your bonus, and you need to do a background check now because you're handling so much money. Roberto not only is not getting that promotion now, but he's probably going to get let go. And the reason being is that, it may be true that, that you have some leverage by not disclosing, but I think it sends a really bad message to an employer that you've not been upfront. I've seen more people in my 10 years being home get fired because a co-employee Googled them and found out something they did, where had the employer known about it, and they could have just said, we were aware, and he's got skill, we're bringing him on. So I think there's two sides to that coin, and you just have to be careful. I don't want to live in a world where I ever have to hide anything from anybody, and I encourage our participants to be the same, and sometimes it's really hard for them to do that, and I get it.
Well, can I speak on that for 1 sec?
Yeah, sure.
So when I get, the being transparent and especially being in recovery where you're supposed to be honest and open about everything. But what Roberto had touched upon is, sometimes you feel less than, when you're coming into a job and you tell them. So for instance, I've done it both ways, getting out of rehab, getting a good job and being completely upfront and honest about my background and that I'm an addict in recovery. And then I've done it, this time around, I did it actually where I didn't tell them. I didn't lie, but I didn't upfront say I'm a drug addict and I'm an alcoholic, because when I had done that in the past, it made me feel lower and less than. But it came out with the same job. I was on a cruise, and I didn't know this, but when you come back on a cruise, they run all the Social Security numbers on the boat, and my warrant popped up that I had. And so I got arrested off the cruise ship.
Wow.
With the job. They let me back. They let me hold my job. But, that's one story, And so I know there are many different stories with it. But for me, it was, in that instance, and this time around, it was better for me to not come in as having that stigma of a drug addict.
As an employer, though, wouldn't you rather have an employee or potential candidate come to you and tell you that up front?
I would, but I would also give them the empathy and the same chance. Would the next employer? I don't know.
Maybe
You
not.
know?
It's interesting too because I think we don't understand the reach of our networking systems and the background system itself. Roberto and I were talking. Roberto, can you tell the story about what happened when you tried to get a place to rent a place?
Oh yeah. So I was telling Jeff, I said, background check even haunted me with Airbnb. So yeah, I got an email one day. Well, one day I went on there to make a reservation. This is probably about the third time or fourth time that I used them. And I went on there to make a reservation, and they said, "Oh, we're going to do a random background check." The random background check came back with my background, and they took my Airbnb membership, and I can no longer rent from Airbnb.
Yeah, we were going on a trip. We had it booked, and then they contacted us and said everything's being refunded. Don't come. You know.
Yeah.
But I have the benefit of like if you Google my name, Kevin Hart, Philadelphia, even you're gonna get 100 pages of somebody else.
Yeah, you don't have to worry about you going down to page 2. Kevin Hart will do it in itself. One of the things we've been talking about in Washington recently is credentialing, and I know talked to Mary about this earlier. And Marcus, you mentioned it too. How important a credential is, whether it's post-secondary and getting your associate's degree, or whether it's getting that career credential that can really set your trajectory. And there's so many opportunities out there. I'm wondering, Marcus, I know you're familiar with one because we talked about it when you came here, about careers like welding. And why is it that we're not doing more to get those high priority industry sectors in front of those men and women that are behind the walls, so that the second they get out, we're actually taking them in a van down to the naval shipyard so they can put their jumpsuits on and start welding?
Well, I mean, I don't know if it's necessarily like who's the we in this conversation. I mean, because if we're talking about like training, if we're talking about training providers, if we're talking about programs that are intended to be able to serve folks who are coming home or behind the walls, I think there is that level of emphasis. I think that ultimately there is not the openness right now from an employer standpoint to be able to expand who we're actually considering for many of these positions. And like even going back to the previous point before, like I mean, we're jumping back and forth between like an idea of dishonesty and equating it to omission, right? So like if I am not sharing with you openness, if I'm not like walking into an interview and saying like this is my situation, then why am I, because I have a criminal record, like have to disclose that when folks who don't, right? They may have something they ultimately may want to be able to hide and may like not want to be able to share. They don't necessarily have to be able to disclose that, right? So like, are we already creating a system of inequity because we're ultimately assuming that if you're not sharing it up front, you're being dishonest? I am literally trying to compare, I'm trying to share how my experiences in this for this particular position allows for me to be the best candidate for the job. Right?
Yeah.
And so going back to kind of like the welding piece. So for instance, and we were talking about this before. So there's been a $5 billion investment within the Philadelphia region from the Philly shipyard to be expanded through the Hanwha investment, right? So this was President Trump was all down here, and ultimately the South Korean president was ultimately here to be able to showcase like this new investments that coming into like this particular area and this space. There's going to be thousands of jobs that's going to be like needed in order for us to be able to have the shipyard to a space where we are creating 10 ships a year. Right now we're averaging 1.5 like per year, right? So these are thousands of jobs that are now available. And essentially, it is not necessarily because of the fact that someone has a record or someone doesn't. It is because of the skills that is necessary to be able to do that particular job. There are not enough training programs or providers who are in the space that is training people to be able to be in a position to compete for these positions. If we had a bunch of, we were talking about this before, if we had a training program behind the walls that was essentially preparing for welders at a rate of for that everyone that was coming out was getting those credentials, we would not have any issues because there are literally no other candidates that are available. We are in an environment right now that is demonizing immigrants, that's demonizing refugees, that is pushing people out. No one wants to come. Okay, and in a city like Philadelphia, in which we already had a number of systemic issues that we are dealing with, we have to be able to increase our economic capacity and our capacity of our citizens to be able to actually satisfy the needs of these jobs that are coming in. Life sciences, advanced manufacturing, welding. Trust me, we have spoken to the Philly shipyard like every other day. If you had someone literally, I mean, and like it's gonna sound terrible, but like they want everyone. They need everyone, because if they do not have the people that they have budgeted for and put within the system, then all those investments are going to go away, and they're going to find another way of being able to satisfy that. So I don't agree that it's necessarily that we don't have the space to be able to bring people in. I think it's a means of, we need to be able to increase the capacity of the community supports to identify people who are interested and have the time and commitment. And I'm not asking for someone to come home after you've been incarcerated for 10 years to take an 8-month training program in which you're not getting paid, you're not getting supported, there's no wraparound supports, to be able to then take a job that you're going to be in 2 a.m. in the middle of December welding for this ship that is a freaking ship. So again, like, I want to just be able to preface that, I think we have to have a greater capacity of the system to be able to support people to prepare them for these jobs. It is not a means of, like, they're just not available.
Awesome.
I think I just want to bring up the point. One thing that I'm experiencing from the prison side, I have met with the Naval Yard. I'm trying to get all the training and trying to get them to the Skills Center welding specifically. I think coming from a city side, the procurement processes and the red tape to get people in is also very difficult. So while we're trying to bring providers in, we're jumping through hoops, depending upon depending upon the price of the training and all of that, and then you have to go through that process. It takes so long. We're just like losing folks. People leaving every day. We need the training opportunities in, but the hoops to jump through continue.
So we're not alone here in Philadelphia. We do some work in New York and other cities, and I think Colette from our office is here to tell you that dealing with New York City is like, it's like, you know, there are challenges in every city. I think what it takes is people in this room that are working in this space to step up and meet with city council and meet with your representatives and say, look, we got to find a way to streamline some of these processes so that we don't have to go through those challenges. The vendor process alone can be unbelievably painful. And I think that that those are things that are very real and they're very tangible to fix. Streamlining a process to get a contract through and making it a priority and making it so it doesn't take 3 years on an RFP before it's even issued. And I think it takes the community voice to get involved in that as well.
Or we bring it up.
Yeah.
There is a team of nonprofits that have been brought together to talk through the procurement process for the city as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of community organizations that are doing great work, but get very frustrated because they don't have adequate funding, they don't have the ability, and sometimes even the RFPs alone are daunting for smaller organizations that are nonprofit that are trying to get in the game to help people. Even the larger organizations have challenges. So you're right, I think it is a system.
And even to the point, and I want to be honest, and we're all friends. We're all going to have a transparent conversation. So, like, the converse is also correct. We have had a history in the city of awarding contracts to programs that have not done what they needed to do, that don't have the placements and completions and credentials, but they know the system. They know the procurement networks. They are large enough to be able to compete. And if you have programs that are we are in desperate need of bringing resources to Southwest Philly, to Northeast Philly, and essentially many of the providers that service those communities are so small that when they're coming for RFPs, I've seen them, I've read them, that they have not been able to compete with the larger organizations that are system-wide. Think about, like, where we met. Community Learning Center was where we met. Small organization. and then merged with an organization, Center for Literacy, to be able to become Beyond Literacy and build its capacity to be able to compete with those providers who have those teams that are competing for these RFPs. And ultimately, like the city, and we work very closely with the city, and we have fortified our procurement process because I'm looking at our vendor list, and I'm seeing like there's not representation from our vendor list of who is actually being served in many of our communities. So how do we increase the capacity of providers who are doing such great work to be able to compete and build their capacity? And also from the provider standpoint, you have to be ready for those contracts. There are so many of the providers who have done great work, got an additional contract, but couldn't handle that increased capacity, and essentially the product of their work started to suffer.
The truth, Marcus, is though it is being done elsewhere around the country. I travel around in Illinois. They have collaboratives that are doing great work where they bring all the partners together. They bring the communities together. They make sure that they have fiscal sponsorship. They make sure that they hold them accountable. They guide them through the process of an audit and all those kinds of things. So there are cities that are doing it much better than the city of Philadelphia. We just have to be creative and think a little bit differently than we've been thinking for the last how many years, where the processes have been the same. So absolutely. We're winding down, and I want to be cautious of time. I'll also give people opportunity to grab some great food from Kevin Hart from their cafe. But I would like to go through with each of you and give me one thing that really we can leave here and say, this is something that we should be centering on to help people coming home find not just a job, but a career. Roberto, you want to kick us off?
Wow. I mean, I guess my biggest thing is just no background checks. Like, get to know somebody. Because, like I said, everyone there loves me right now. But if they knew that tidbit of information, how would they treat me? So that background check is just a big deterrent. And it just, even if you say fair chance hiring, ban the box, it doesn't make a difference. Like, if you really want to give somebody a chance, it needs to be no background checks at all.
Bold. Marcus?
Well, we're in a different time right now. Resources are being pulled. Programs are being tied. Programs are being hamstrung. We were just in Washington advocating for Title II because it's part of the president's proposed budget. He has proposed to wipe out Title II funds completely. The House Republicans have started their negotiations for reauthorization by saying that we want to zero out Title I funds. These are specific legislation that's designed to be able to help communities with workforce, employment, training, and adult education resources. And the negotiations and what has started at zero. Okay? So even if we reach a middle point, it's going to be dramatic cuts that radically transforms systems. So I personally, when we were talking about DC, I was very frustrated because essentially we're talking to the same people who are advocates for the same things that we believe, and it has not been working, all right? So if I were to say anything, to be able to get a fair shot, we have to be more creative and think with a certain level of ingenuity and tenacity that we never had before, at least as a community. And so I quite honestly don't care what Dwight Evans says. Like, Dwight Evans is going to be a supporter. I care about the 20 individuals who are right now controlling the narrative for all legislation from a federal standpoint. And so I don't care if you live in Arizona. I need for us all to be able to be like, I'm not calling my congressman, I'm calling that congressman. Because if we get that congressman to be able to move, then that's 5% of the people who are really making the decisions right now that are impacting all of us. So I know it's not necessarily like from a groundswell standpoint. I want to be able to continue to be supportive of our communities, make sure that we're obviously thinking creatively about how we're able to like address our own implicit bias and make sure that we're not just indirectly preventing or building barriers that our folks have to navigate around. But we have to start thinking outside the box about how do we get people who are disproportionately impacting all of our lives to be able to stop doing what they're doing.
Kevin, what do you got for us?
So I know for me, whenever I was down and out and in one of those spots, and thinking about a new life and a new start, I had the benefit of having the experience in a field, so that I knew that I could go get a good job somewhere. And it was up to me to go do that. So I think there's a lot of people that are just not fortunate enough to have experience or job training enough in a certain field that can provide something exciting for them, because for me, I remember the last time I was sitting in rehab and I was getting excited about what the future held for me if I could just stay sober. So if I worked towards this sobriety and made the right choices, that there was a future for me. So instilling that in people or giving them a training, the programs, that will give them hope for that future, that excitement that you get for having a career, something that you can be proud of.
Awesome. So I want to open up any questions from the floor. Anybody have anything that's been gnawing at them?
I do have one question.
Sure.
I forgot the gentleman's name, I apologize, sir. But as somebody who works in a visual reentry facility, right? Somebody who's familiar with PrEP. I know you all are familiar with the PrEP program where the city would incentivize businesses to hire people just as infected. Keep them on for 6 months, you could get, I think in Texas, something up to $3,000. Something that kind of fell apart for, whatever reason, and I'm kind of brainstorming ways to invigorate that program. You, as a business owner, someone who's been on both sides, what would your feedback be in terms of what the city needs to do? I know we're talking about what you guys do, which is great, but at the end of the day, we need to also incentivize this city because whether we like it or not, until we change the culture, it's not sexy, right? Hiring people, there's stigmas, there's culture and everything else that's difficult to transform, which we need to do on that end. But in terms of talking about ours, right? In terms of talking about the government, at least locally, how do we incentivize businesses to do this, to want to do this, or at least be consistent?
So to be honest with you, I didn't even know those programs existed until like a month ago. I had hired someone right out of prison. He was gone for a long time, and now he's working for the Ardella House. He's got a great job, but he worked in my cafe for the first 18 months, and he was telling me about this a month ago. I didn't even know it existed. I've been hiring people, justice impacted all along, not knowing that there were these incentives. I've been super busy keeping my head above water, starting a business and running it for 3 years. I'm sure a more savvy business person would have known these programs existed or sought them out, but maybe just, somehow getting it out, that these programs do exist. There are incentives for it so that people who aren't inclined to just do it for the right reason, would perhaps maybe give it a try. But also, maybe also talking to other, I guess with other small businesses, talking to other small business employers who have done it and their experience with it, that it's not negative, and I'd be more than happy to talk to anyone, so.
Get it out there.
And my name's Kevin Hart. You're going to learn today.
Uh,
Say it with your chest.
Yeah, and it's true too. I mean, there's another tax. There's a federal bonding you can get for people that you want to hire. But as I always say, it's not the first 5,000 employers worry about. It's the 100,000 plus that come after that on liability front that they worry about. So I think the incentives are important. Any other questions?
I'll just mention to that point. I don't know. We've had conversations before. But that's another opportunity. So as part of the Workforce Investment Board, we have on-the-job training dollars and incumbent worker training dollars. So this essentially is that it will subsidize the wages for someone if there's an identified either training or skill gap that might exist that may, not necessarily prevent but inhibit someone from actually being successful in that position. So even with our work within youth systems, our C2L, we have done a leveraged funding with the city to be able to build the capacity for more youth slots for summer and school year work-based learning experiences. there's an opportunity there to be able to replicate that same process with on-the-job training dollars or incumbent worker training dollars, which is designed for folks who are in those positions who like want to be in managerial positions, but maybe like the employer says like, you don't have any experience with like payroll or like recruiting. We want to be able to give you that training, and the workforce board will subsidize those wages while someone is participating within those trainings. If something like that was combined with the city initiative to be able to have a full-fledged strategy, and honestly, I think same-day work pay is also another aspect there too, that it can be a natural transition for someone who's coming out, needs immediate assistance, and push them into like transition and then full-time work. Those are the type of like, I think, creative opportunities that we can be able to work through to be able to build capacity.
Same-day work strategies just make good sense. Paying people as they get there, as they work is just, especially in the justice space, is so important. I got a call recently, helped somebody get a job at Jeff's, and they get paid every 2 weeks. And he said, I can't get, my car's going to get repossessed. And it's like same-day pay just makes good sense. And even to be able to bank it for an employer, to advance it for an employer where they recoup it and put it back in the fund afterwards or something like that might work. We want to be conscious of time, but first of all, thank you all for coming. Second, a big shout out to my staff, Meg Tavares, who's up front, and Colette for orchestrating this. Again, Eastern, thank you so much. You guys are awesome, and your staff are amazing. Next Thursday night is our big event at Rivers Casino, and we'll be honoring Brandon there. I hope everybody will come. We've done something this year. We've done it in the past. Meg's brilliant brainstorm, bless you, is we've actually had people buy tickets for those that can't afford them or that have come home. We have a boatload of them. So we want to see people that can come and enjoy themselves when they've come home and may not be able to pay for one of those fancy gala tickets, which this is not. But if you have somebody that you'd like to give a ticket to, Desmond, if there are people that and even in your office that would like to come, in the prison for sure, preferably we can get some early release and let them out and let them come back in. It's on state. It's close, Columbus Boulevard. But we have plenty of tickets available. We'd like to be able to give them to people that would like a night out and to really enjoy themselves. So please let me know. Hit me up with an email, see Meg, or just tell how many tickets you need, and we'll make sure we take care of you. To our panel, thank you. Kevin, you're amazing. Marcus, thank you. Roberto. The conversation won't stop here. We have some food and refreshments that Kevin's provided, and in the hall down this hallway. If you go through the exit to cell block 8, and it'll be down on the right, and we'll continue the conversation. But I want to thank everybody for being here. We didn't come to any dire solutions. This is a long-term problem. It's been around for a long-term time. And we have to fix it. We have to fix it because we have almost 2 million people incarcerated in our country, and 600,000 return every year. And if we don't help them find employment, then it's not rocket science what's going to happen. We're going to keep those revolving prison doors going around and around and around. We need to stop it, and it really stops with employment. If we can help people find careers, then that is one of the biggest barriers to people not going back inside. So thank you all for coming, and looking forward to catching up with you and grabbing some talk at the reception. So thanks, everybody.